The mist which hangs before you offers you a choice, to pass through or to escape. Beyond it are legendary tales, moments where heroism is tested one final time. This is a story of both loyalty and betrayal, courage and desperation. You alone are left to discern what to believe as you pass through what we call the fog of war. King Magnus woke to find his command tent empty. His generals had fled in the night, his soldiers scattered. Only he and his final 100 men remained. Facing them were 50,000 barbarian warriors. This was Nordheim's final day. The Kingdom of Nordheim had stood for 1,000 years. From the northern mountains to the southern plains, the lands lived in peace under the Iron Crown's protection. The capital, Ironhold, displayed power to the entire world with its high walls and magnificent towers. King Magnus Ironheart was the kingdom's 16th ruler. At 45, he was an experienced warrior and wise leader. He had sat on the throne for 20 years, governing his people with justice. But everything had begun changing over the past 5 years. Reports from the northern borders were troubling. Barbarian tribes were uniting, beginning to advance southward. Magnus had taken this threat seriously. He had strengthened his army, reinforced border fortresses, but neither he nor his commanders could foresee the magnitude of the coming storm. Early in 1347, the report arrived. The Northern Tribes Alliance had been formed. 7 different barbarian tribes had united under the leadership of Grimjaw Bloodaxe of the Blood Wolves. This barbarian army consisted of 50,000 warriors. All were ruthless, disciplined, and unafraid of death. Their goal was simple: conquer Nordheim and seize its riches. Magnus sprang into action. He sent war summons to all his vassals. He requested support from feudal lords, city militias, and knightly orders. The response wasn't what he hoped. Some lords made excuses, others remained completely silent. Magnus could only assemble an army of 12,000 men. Still, he was hopeful. His soldiers were well trained, their weapons quality, their morale high. He believed he could stop the barbarians. This would be his final mistake. The first clash occurred at Silverbrook Valley. Magnus had given army command to General Roderick Stormwind, an experienced warrior, a trusted friend. The plan was simple. They would meet the barbarians in the valley, use their advantages in the narrow pass. But the barbarians proved much cleverer than expected. Grimjaw's strategy surprised Magnus. The enemy made a flanking movement from the side hills. The Nordheim army was trapped. The Battle of Silverbrook was a complete disaster. Of 12,000 soldiers, only 8,000 managed to return. General Roderick had died in battle. Magnus had lost his closest friend. But the real shock came after the battle. Panic began among the surviving soldiers. Many deserted the army, returning to their homelands. Magnus was left with an army of 5,000 men. After the Silverbrook defeat, Magnus switched to defensive strategy. He evacuated border fortresses, concentrated his forces around Ironhold. But the barbarians didn't stop. They kept advancing. Each passing day brought news of another fallen castle. Northwatch Castle surrendered in 3 days. Irongate Castle lasted a week. The commander of Stormhaven Castle fled without fighting. With each fallen castle, Magnus's prestige diminished. The lords began blaming him. "The king is weak," they said. "He cannot win this war." Magnus heard this but couldn't protest, because they might be right. The biggest blow came from Lord Blackstone. Magnus's most powerful vassal announced he was leaving the army with his 2,000 soldiers. "Your Majesty, this war is lost," Blackstone said. "I'm going to save my family." Magnus tried to convince him to stay, but it was useless. Lord Blackstone left, taking his soldiers with him. In October, the barbarians came before Ironhold. They camped outside the city walls. Grimjaw banners surrounded the area. Magnus had a total of 3,000 soldiers in the city, 5,000 civilian militia, and sufficient food supplies. He could hold out for at least 6 months. Morale was high at the beginning of the siege. Ironhold's walls were thick, its towers tall. The barbarians couldn't breach these walls. But as time passed, the situation began to change. The barbarians weren't just waiting. They constantly raided, testing the walls. Worse, whispers of treason began circulating in the city. Some lords were considering abandoning Magnus. Toward the end of November, Magnus realized his commanders no longer trusted him. In war council meetings, they remained silent, began questioning his plans. General Bjorn Ironshield had been Magnus's friend since childhood. He was the person Magnus trusted most. One evening Bjorn came alone. "Magnus, we need to speak the truth now." "What truth?" "This war is lost. There's no way to stop Grimjaw. If we surrender now, we can at least save part of our people." Magnus was shocked. "You too, Bjorn? Are you abandoning me too?" "I'm not abandoning you, I'm trying to save you." But Magnus refused. The next morning, Bjorn and the other generals had vanished. They had left the city in the middle of the night. Only 1,000 loyal soldiers remained with Magnus. Magnus gathered the people in the castle courtyard. 5,000 civilians listened to him with curiosity. "My people," Magnus said, "I know the situation is difficult. Our commanders are gone. Our soldiers have decreased. But I am here. I am here with you." "Your Majesty, why don't you flee?" called an old man. The others fled. "Because I am the King of Nordheim. These lands are my responsibility. You are my people. A king does not abandon his people." "But will we die?" asked a young woman. Magnus paused. He could have lied. He could have given hope. But these people deserved the truth. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Perhaps we will die. But we will die with honor. And perhaps a miracle will happen." The people listened silently. Some cried, some prayed. But no one left. That night Magnus understood where true leadership began. In December, the situation worsened further. The civilian militia disbanded. Most returned home, deciding to spend their final days with their families. Only 100 professional soldiers remained with Magnus. These were the Royal Guards, the elite warriors, men ready to die for Magnus. Captain Erik Wolfbane led these 100 men. 30 years old, he had served Magnus for 10 years. "Your Majesty," Erik said, "give the order, we'll get you out of the city tonight. You can flee south. Organize resistance elsewhere." Magnus shook his head. "No, Erik, this is my place. Nordheim's heart beats here. If I flee, the kingdom truly dies. But if we stay here, we'll all die. Then we'll die. But it will be a glorious death." Erik bowed his head. "We live by your Majesty's commands." That night, the 100 men gathered in the castle hall. Magnus gave them his final speech. "My soldiers," Magnus said, "you know this may be our final night. Tomorrow Grimjaw will attack. We are only 100, he has 50,000. The soldiers were silent, but there was no fear in their eyes. "I won't lie to you. Our chance of winning this war is very small. We will probably all die." "Then why are we fighting?" asked a young soldier. Magnus smiled. "Because some things are more important than death. Honor, loyalty, protecting what we love. These are the values we fight for." "What happens if you die?" asked another. "If I die, give me a place in stories. Tell your children that once 100 men fought against 50,000. They didn't fear, didn't flee, stood to the end." The soldiers rose to their feet. They drew their swords. "For King Magnus," they roared. Magnus was moved. These men were ready to die for him. "My soldiers," Magnus said, "you know this may be our final night. Tomorrow Grimjaw will attack. We are only 100, he has 50,000. The soldiers were silent, but there was no fear in their eyes. "I won't lie to you. Our chance of winning this war is very small. We will probably all die." "Then why are we fighting?" asked a young soldier. Magnus smiled. "Because some things are more important than death. Honor, loyalty, protecting what we love. These are the values we fight for." "What happens if you die?" asked another. "If I die, give me a place in stories. Tell your children that once 100 men fought against 50,000. They didn't fear, didn't flee, stood to the end." The soldiers rose to their feet. They drew their swords. "For King Magnus," they roared. Magnus was moved. These men were ready to die for him. When morning came, Grimjaw sent an envoy for peace. Magnus met with him at the castle gate. Grimjaw Bloodaxe was a giant of a man, 2 meters tall, a mountain of muscle. His body bore countless battle scars. His eyes were cold and merciless. "King Magnus," Grimjaw said, "I'm making my final offer. Surrender, and I'll let you and your 100 men go free." "In return for what?" "Nordheim becomes mine. The castle, the treasury, the people, everything." Magnus considered. This offer was tempting. He could survive. "What about my people? What happens to them?" Grimjaw shrugged. "The strong become slaves. The weak die. That's the rule of war." Magnus's decision was clear. "I reject your offer. Then you'll all die. So be it. At least we'll die with honor." Grimjaw laughed. Honor doesn't fill the belly, king, but your choice. We attack tomorrow. Magnus couldn't sleep that night. He sat alone in the castle's highest tower, looking out over his kingdom. The city of Ironhold was silent. People were in their homes, waiting for what would come tomorrow. Children, elderly, mothers, they all trusted Magnus. The iron crown felt heavy on his head. It carried a 1,000-year legacy. Neither this crown, nor this kingdom, nor these people deserved the end he was preparing. But sometimes fate was like this. Sometimes to become a hero, one had to die. Magnus made plans until morning. How could he stop 50,000 people with 100 men? This seemed impossible. But the impossible could also happen. Miracles had occurred in history. Perhaps he could accomplish a miracle. As dawn broke, Magnus donned his armor. His father King Thormund's daily armor, made of the finest steel. His sword Frostbite was a 1,000-year family heirloom. In the castle courtyard, 100 men waited ready, all fully equipped, ready for death. Magnus gave them his final instructions. Men, today we're not just fighting, we're making history. This battle will be told for centuries. What's our plan? Asked Captain Erik. Magnus opened the city map. Grimjaw will attack from the main gate. We'll meet him there. We'll buy time to ensure peace. How do we fight 50,000 people? Not with conventional war rules, with guerrilla tactics. In the streets, in buildings, on rooftops, we'll attack from every corner. This wasn't a plan. This was suicide, but they had no other choice. The attack began with Grimjaw's horn blast. Thousands of barbarians began running toward the main gate. Magnus had positioned himself on the tower above the gate. He had 20 archers with him. When he saw the first wave, he gave the order. Fire! Arrows fell like rain. Dozens of barbarians died. But new ones took their places. They brought battering rams. Giant tree trunks began pounding the gate. Erik, Magnus shouted. Second plan. Captain Erik waited in the castle courtyard. At Magnus's signal, he moved behind the gate with 50 men. When the first barbarians entered, they met them. A terrible clash began. In the narrow space, 50 Nordheim soldiers fought against hundreds of barbarians. This wasn't an equal fight, but heroism began here. After the main gate was broken, barbarians spread throughout the city. Magnus switched to guerrilla warfare as planned. He divided his remaining 80 men into small groups. Each group defended a different street. Magnus himself positioned with a 10-man group at the central square. This was the heart of the city. Barbarians came from every direction. Magnus and his men were trapped in the center of the circle. Your Majesty, Erik called. We're surrounded. Magnus drew his sword and replied, Then we fight in all directions. An unprecedented battle began. Magnus and his 80 men fought for their lives against thousands of barbarians in the streets. Every corner was a battlefield, every building a fortress, every street a trench. As the battle progressed, Magnus's men died one by one. Erik died from an axe blow. The other loyal soldiers also gave their lives. The final 20 soldiers gathered at the castle center. Magnus established the final resistance point with them. Grimjaw personally entered the castle hall. He had his strongest warriors with him. King Magnus, Grimjaw roared. Final chance. Surrender. Magnus removed the iron crown from his head, placed it on the ground. This crown has protected these lands for 1,000 years. Today it dies with me. When you die, I'll wear that crown. That crown only obeys those of Nordheim blood. You cannot wear it. Grimjaw became angry. Then we both die. A historic duel began between the two leaders. Magnus was old but experienced. Grimjaw was strong but hasty. The battle lasted for hours. Just as Magnus's final strength was being depleted, horn sounds came from the distance. Different horn sounds. Soldiers looking from the castle windows shouted in amazement. Your Majesty, help has arrived. Magnus looked outside. A well-armed army was coming from the south. It was King Aldric's East March army. Lord Blackstone had also come, with his 2,000 soldiers, and Lord Ravenclaw and Lord Silvermane, all the lords who had abandoned Magnus, had returned. What's happening? Magnus asked. Erik, wounded, answered. Your Majesty, I had called them. I had secretly sent messages. Magnus was surprised. When? The first night, without your permission. At that moment Magnus understood what true loyalty meant. The 15,000-strong relief army reached the city. Grimjaw's army was split in two. Magnus regained hope. Men, attack! The final 20 soldiers, together with Magnus, emerged from the castle center. They attacked Grimjaw's army from behind. At the same time, the relief armies began attacking from outside the city. The besiegers were besieged. The barbarians were confused. Grimjaw looked around in fear. This is impossible. Where did they come from? Magnus smiled. The triumph of good over cruelty, Grimjaw. You never understood this. The duel between Grimjaw and Magnus continued in the castle courtyard. While the great battle raged around them, the two leaders determined their own fates. You cannot defeat me, Grimjaw roared. I am the leader of the Bloodwolves. I am the King of Nordheim, Magnus replied, and I will protect my people. The final move came from Magnus. The frostbite sword pierced Grimjaw's heart. The barbarian leader collapsed to the ground. This, impossible. No, Magnus said. This is a miracle. When Grimjaw died, the barbarian army scattered. The warriors, left without a leader, began to flee. Nordheim was saved. After the battle ended, Magnus addressed his people from the castle balcony. Thousands had gathered below. My people, Magnus said. We won! Nordheim is free! The people roared with joy. Long live King Magnus! Long live Nordheim! Lord Blackstone approached Magnus. Your Majesty, I beg your forgiveness. We betrayed you. Magnus shook his head. Not betrayal. Fear. And fear is human. What matters is that you returned. Erik, wounded, came to Magnus. Your Majesty, I apologize for sending those messages. No apologies, Erik. You saved my life. You saved all our lives. When Magnus was alone that night, he reflected. What had he learned from this war? First, true leadership is revealed in difficult times. Anyone can be a leader in easy times. Second, loyalty is not unconditional, but those who understand the truth eventually return. Third, miracles can happen, but first you must give everything. Fourth, a king must be ready to die for his people. Only then does the people become worthy of him. The iron crown felt heavy on his head, but now for a different reason. Not from the weight of responsibility, but from the weight of earned respect. In the days following the victory, Magnus began rebuilding his kingdom. The lords who had fled returned with shame, begging forgiveness. Magnus pardoned them all, understanding that fear had driven their actions. A kingdom is not built on vengeance, he told his council. It's built on understanding and second chances. The reconstruction of Ironhold began immediately. The walls were rebuilt higher and stronger. New towers were added, new defenses installed. But more importantly, Magnus reformed his military system. No longer would he rely solely on feudal levies. He created a standing professional army, trained and ready. Captain Erik, recovered from his wounds, became the commander of this new force. Never again will Nordheim stand with only 100 men against the world, Magnus declared. Magnus also discovered something profound about the Iron Crown. When he had removed it during the battle, ready to die with it, the crown had revealed its true power, not in magic or mystical properties, but in the willing sacrifice of its bearer. The crown doesn't make the king, he realized. The king's willingness to die for his people makes the crown meaningful. This understanding changed how he ruled. Every decision was weighed against one question. Am I willing to stake my life on this choice? The people sensed this change. Magnus had always been respected, but now he was beloved. The king who had stood alone against impossible odds had earned something more valuable than fear or mere loyalty. He had earned love. The defeat of Grimjaw's horde sent shockwaves through the barbarian lands. The unity that had taken years to build crumbled in days. The 7 tribes returned to their old feuds, blaming each other for the disaster. Some barbarian survivors came to Ironhold seeking mercy. Magnus, remembering the lesson of forgiveness he had learned from his own lords, offered them terms. Lay down your weapons, swear loyalty to Nordheim, and you may remain, he declared. But know this, the first act of rebellion will be your last. Many accepted. They became citizens of Nordheim, their warrior skills channeled into defending rather than destroying. Grimjaw's body was given a burial worthy of a warrior, despite his cruelty. Even enemies deserve honor in death, Magnus explained to those who protested. Word of the Battle of the Hundred spread far beyond Nordheim's borders. Bards sang songs of the king who stood alone, of the 100 who faced thousands, of the miracle that saved a kingdom. Other nations sent envoys, seeking alliance with a king who had achieved the impossible. Magnus received them all with dignity, but made it clear that Nordheim's strength came not from its military might, but from the unity of its people. "We are strong because we stand together," he told the ambassador from the Eastern Kingdoms. "When that unity is tested, it emerges stronger than before." The Iron Crown Wars, as historians would later call them, became a study in leadership for future generations of rulers. Years later, when Erik was on his deathbed, he confessed the full truth about the messages he had sent. "Your Majesty," he whispered, "I didn't just send for help that night. I also sent word of your refusal to flee, of your willingness to die for the people. That's what brought them back. Not my request for aid, but the news of your courage." Magnus held his old friend's hand. "You saved us all, Erik, not just with your messages, but with your loyalty." "I would do it again, Majesty, 1,000 times over." Erik died peacefully, knowing his king was safe, his kingdom secure. Magnus ruled for 30 more years after the Iron Crown Wars. His reign became known as the Golden Age of Nordheim. The kingdom prospered, expanded peacefully, and became a beacon of justice in an often cruel world. When Magnus finally died, at the age of 75, the entire kingdom mourned. His funeral was attended by kings and commoners alike, all united in their grief for the loss of a truly great ruler. The Iron Crown passed to his son, Prince William, who had learned well the lessons of his father's greatest trial, but it was understood by all that William would always be compared to the king who had faced 50,000 with only 100 men. Today, 1,000 years later, the Iron Crown still rests in Nordheim. The kingdom has faced many challenges since Magnus's time, but none quite so severe as the barbarian invasion. In the Great Hall of Ironhold Castle, a painting depicts the final battle. Magnus stands in the center, sword raised, while his 100 men fight around him. At the edges of the painting, reinforcements can be seen arriving, but the focus remains on those who stood alone when all seemed lost. Visitors to the castle often ask their guides about the legend. Is it true? Did it really happen as the stories say? The guides always give the same answer. Look at the kingdom around you. Look at the peace, the prosperity, the justice. That's your proof. Magnus's story isn't just about one king or one battle. It's about the choice every leader faces when everything seems lost, to flee or to stand, to abandon principles or to uphold them even unto death. The Iron Crown Wars teach us that true victory isn't always measured in battles won or enemies defeated. Sometimes it's measured in the willingness to face impossible odds for the sake of something greater than ourselves. Magnus could have fled. His generals did. His lords did. History would not have blamed him for choosing survival over certain death, but he chose to stay. He chose to stand with his people when standing meant dying, and in that choice he found not death, but immortality. The Iron Crown still shines in Nordheim. Magnus's descendants wear it with pride, and legend says that when the kingdom faces its greatest peril again, the spirits of the 100 will return to fight once more,